appreciate everybody taking the time to sit through the webinar. There's a fair number of things to cover today. Some of it may seem a little dry. Please bear with me through the first few slides. Really, the goal of assessing projects stems from a lifelong focus on my career, and that's project recovery. I've pretty much gone around where things have started and we're in trouble. We're asked to come in and fix them. The first thing that always has to happen for me is a core decision. Do you really want to do this? So being successful is everybody's goal, but avoiding failure tends to be the more important thing in my world. Everybody who's in trouble tends to want to believe that no matter what they're doing, all they have to do is do it better and they'll get out of trouble. It creates a very interesting marketplace. There's a lot of projects that need our expertise. They call us and they hope that we're going to pull them through to the finish line. There's actually more demand for our work than there is for supply. That puts us in a very interesting position. It gives us the opportunity to choose. That choice can be based on a lot of things. It might just be that you really want to support whatever that project is doing. It's helping the homeless. Or maybe that it's a new technology you just really want to get into. But at the end of the day, everybody only benefits if the project comes out complete and successful. So avoiding failure, top of mind. So this presentation is really going to walk through my personal measures, the things that I look at when I walk into an environment, and I've really come up with a fairly calculated approach to it. I'm going to try to explain what each of the measures are about and how they're weighted, and hopefully at the end you'll come out with a list of questions and answers that you can use as you're talking to potential customers and potential projects to determine where they fall in a range, and you can decide whether or not it's worthwhile moving forward. Like many things, this is a three-act play. All the project measurements that I use fall into one of three categories: readiness, delivery, or control. Now you're going to see this throughout this presentation that there's these weighting factors. At the basic scale, the 1X, are the controls. These are fairly standard things for management and the environments that people use. And as you score them, a 10 is a 10 and a 1 is a 1. More important to me than controls really is delivery. So every score inside a delivery segment is going to be a weighted value, twice that of the control. And at the very top of the food chain is the readiness. Now, it may seem odd that readiness is 4 times management and controls. But as it turns out, no matter how good a process is in place, no matter how good you have metrics and measures, and even if you have a great implementation team, if you fail in maturity, you will fail. There's almost no way around it. And if you find a very immature space that has communication problems, no amount of technical expertise, no amount of controlling and tracking is ever going to repair it. So let's start with maturity. As far as maturity goes, I've got 3 areas I look at specifically. At the bottom is self-diagnosis, whether an organization is capable of identifying its own problems. It's pretty interesting. You walk into a space and people say, hey, we need help. And you ask them, what do you need help about? And frequently they will say, I'm not making my dates or I'm behind in my financials. But that isn't a diagnostic statement. That's actually sort of the shadow, not the thing. What you really want to do is start asking questions about, do you have problems in escalation? Do you have problems, actually measuring what's moving forward? If they have the ability to be introspective, it's got some good real value in terms of how mature the organization is. More important than that, of course, is their ability to take those things they've seen and actually do something positive, whether or not they are self-healing. Self-healing organizations have assets internally. When you ask people, who will you turn to make a decision, they say that's somebody outside. They're not going to score high for self-healing. If you say, why is it that you believe you're behind? And they say, I've been externally audited, not self-healing. Last, but more important than both of the prior two, is the ability to be proactive. Getting ahead of a problem is always better than solving the problem. This is very much like the fire department. It's very important we have firemen. It's very important when there is a fire, there's somebody to put it out. But it's much more important that we don't have a fire to begin with. Really mature environments are good about looking forward. They see what's coming at them. They make decisions about those things proactively so that they don't end up having to diagnose and ultimately heal. The most mature of organizations can actually prevent most of their problems and become increasingly effective project over project. The more immature organizations obviously don't do the proactive work, and instead they sort of reflexively react over and over and over again. They tend not to learn that lesson. So in the world of readiness, immaturity, bad. Another part of maturity is, of course, process, and process breaks basically into activities and commitments. So this is an optimization model used by a variety of organizations, and it is a way of determining if an organization is mature from a very basic all the way up to a dynamic range. Most people try to shoot for standardized. Basic is sort of chaotic. But across all of these are the bands for different things to look into specifically. Now, obviously, things like training and policy and organizational capabilities are important, but they're not important to delivery directly. So oddly enough, organizations that tell me they have mature HR environments, while I can appreciate that, doesn't actually apply at a project-specific level. If you're trying to use the project as a training activity, you've missed the point. Most deliveries, particularly deliveries that are bringing in outside help, they need to be able to be self-sustaining. The sustainment over time is a good future activity, but of little value for direct implementation. On the other hand, implementation and the ability to release an actual deliverable weight very high. Each of these segments are going to vary based on things like, is this the way it's always done? You know, you look at somebody and you say, geez, you have a hard time getting code out of test and into a production environment. You have a hard time getting your infrastructure connected between sites. And you start hearing things like, this is the way it's always done. Or, in the past, we've never been able to measure this and we're not able to measure it now. When people fall back onto those reactive statements, you know you're in a very basic or potentially standardized environment, certainly not into the advanced or dynamic range. The ability to do requirements and design and address them in a sort of clear, introspective, and somewhat truthful manner, it's very important in terms of activities to make sure you're getting your deliverable right, but at the end of the day, it's never going to be quite as important as your ability to actually produce something, the implementation part, and hand it out. Obviously, these things go hand in hand. If you score poorly on any of the requirement sides, no matter how good your implementation is, your project's going to fail. And remember, our number one goal here is avoiding failure. On the commitments version of process, we really look at the same range across the maturity of an organization, but now we're looking at things like executive commitment and enterprise's ability to leverage that commitment. It's a very interesting thing, executive stakeholder commitment. Everybody talks about it. And if it's done well, it can be a truly buoyant part of a project. If you fall into trouble, you can turn to your executive, you can get more money, more resources, or simply time. But when it doesn't go well, so you've picked the wrong executive, that person doesn't have the political capital to support you, it can actually drag a project down. So tentative or tacit executive commitment is actually a negative thing. You really need executives that will step up and be clear and be supportive. That goes hand in hand with enterprise usage. If you aren't leveraging the fact you have a commitment, you can't possibly score high across the board. Taken together, what we have is the activities and the commitments to move an organization from basic up through standardized, advanced, and into a dynamic environment where they are capable of delivering. As I've gone across, I don't know, say 100 projects, the number one question that comes up is, why do projects fail? What is it that people do over and over again that causes the trouble? And as much